a big hitter in this field. Sumaira ma'am, I need an opening remark from you because, to be honest, when we spoke on the phone, my hand was shaking because I've only read everything that you have done, and to have a conversation with you itself is an honor. And ma'am, if you could just throw some light on on the topic and how we can contribute. Ma'am, you're not audible. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I feel embarrassed at that kind of introduction, especially when Ashish is there and others are there who I look to, and I think I would rather say that I'm part of everybody, and I hope that everybody, all of us, are working together. I'd like to talk about sustainability in context of the other issue, not honking, that I work on, which is sand mining. And sand is the second most extracted material in the world after water. I was attacked by the sand mafia in 2004 and hospitalized, and I was nearly killed in 2010 by the sand mafia. And I realized at that time that nobody knows that sand is being mined and it's being used to create our entire built civilization, our cities. Everything is made of sand, cement, concrete. The building you and I are sitting on, in all the infrastructure which surrounds us. And most of the sand which is mined in India is illegally mined. So it's probably the largest single scam in our country. Unfortunately, it's so large that no one wants to give us those figures. So we don't have access to the figures, but we do know that our entire GDP growth is based on it. So while I agree with Ashish and the others on this panel that sustainability is very difficult, and maybe there are other ways of doing things which are better than what we call circular economy and sustainable models, nevertheless, I don't see that we are going to stop building. We have been told that India is going to make a new Chicago every year. So my endeavor at this time, and it was for the first time in 2010, when we asked the court to start looking at alternatives to natural sand. And very unfortunately, the government came out with the only alternative being natural stone, which then proceeded to destroy our mountainsides. So the cure was almost worse than what we were trying to cure. Very recently, Dr. Shyam Asolekar from IIT Bombay has been working with me in figuring out solutions. And it's only in November of last year that for the very first time, he was the first person to give me figures of our sand requirement in the country at 60 million metric tons a year, which will cover all our requirements. And his studies also show that we have enough what he calls legacy waste, which is the garbage which is burning and creating a huge other environmental problems of air pollution, mangrove destruction, and all of that. And it can be recycled in various forms and ways to substitute 100% of our requirement. So I'm so happy to be speaking to young people today, because I think while we may come up with the problems and we may come up with some vague kind of solution like this can be done, it's going to be up to them to make it commercial and make it viable and make it possible so that we can keep building if that's what we want to do, whether we agree with that model or not. That's our current model. And that we can do it in a way which actually solves another environmental problem. So I look forward to discussing that further. It is definitely sand mining an issue which is worsening the effects of climate change in every possible way, from sea level rise to groundwater depletion to just about everything that we can count as part of climate change.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. You mentioned about how sand is being used in, sand mining basically is the biggest scam, and how it's being used so much in infra and nobody seems to notice. But since we are touching the topic of infrastructure and the growth of infrastructure, as you mentioned, we are supposed to build a Chicago every year. All this infrastructure is going to be powered by energy. And as of now, if we look at it, India gives around only 21% of our energy resources are renewable energy. Everything else is non-renewable. We are depleting our resources day in and day out. As far as I know, there are a couple of new steel plants that are now in process in Gujarat that are coming in, which are going to have humongous, requirements for coal and all of that. So, what I want to ask and put it, and this is up to the entire panel. Each of you all can share your opinion. We are definitely coming together in identifying the problem, but can we like brainstorm and churn out as alternative solutions as to what all can be put on the table? Because infrastructure at the end of the day has to happen with our growing population. The need is such. How do we manage, growing at that scale, but also providing and ensuring we protect our resources? And anyone from the panel can take this.
I think I'll go first just to set a tone to this. There is one major question I've had, and this is also for the other panelists over here. For example, if India today is going into its ecologically sensitive zones, trying to kind of go coal mining or mining any other important resource, we call it like destruction of our environment. But the same India is going to import the same coal from a country like Australia, where they have degraded their ecological forests and things like that. So what I don't understand the dichotomy is that in the realm of development, if we do something in our own country, we're destroying our own environment. But while we would be very willing to import the substitute from any other country at the same time, something very similar in what we would refer to it as a substitute in terms of the economics that we can create in our own country. So when we are looking at such level of issues, and especially related to basics such as power, transport, and things like that, then what is the cost we're kind of willing to pay for these kind of people at the same time? So that's just the thought process that I would want. It's always a conflict for me myself as well, because we talk about environmentally sound solutions, but we would end up importing those solutions from other countries, whereas the carbon footprint of the import itself would offset the positive impact it would have. So either the option is like zero consumerism, which is not possible because India has just about begun consumerism. We're just seeing the first wave of consumerism. And secondly, it's unfortunate that for us, development has come at a time when the environment has been of prime importance. Unfortunately, Europe, America, and all grew at a time when nobody gave a damn about the environment. Their cities were built on coal. Their cities were dark. Their cities were as dirty as some of our cities are today back in the day. So what is going to be the unique different model? Because it's not like India is building its cities with different technology. So that's where I see this kind of conundrum playing out, and not too many effective solutions if we have to kind of go down any development path for the rest of our people.
Completely agree. Completely agree. I think this definitely sets the tone as to, how we could dialogue on this. Ashiji, I'm sure you would have some inputs.
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying in my first remarks. There is no such thing as sustainable growth. It's one of the worst and most dangerously seductive oxymorons that we have, contradictions in term. And it actually leads exactly to what Avnish has pointed out as the thing, that we actually outsource our problems. The West did that with us. Now we are doing it with other countries that are either weaker or for some reason or the other complying with us, like whether it's indigenous territories in Australia or it's indigenous territories in Africa, Ethiopia, etc. Indian corporations are actually doing exactly what Western corporations and governments did to us in colonial times and still are doing. And so we don't have anything but the earth. No, we're not going to go to the moon and get anything where there's nobody living, presumably. So there is no, I mean, I don't think there's an option for us but to challenge growth. Now we can say this is difficult, etc., etc. But 100 years back when women started protesting against men's domination, at that point also people said, "Ye to kabhi hone nahi wala hai. Women will always be subjugated." But we see, at least half the panelists today are women because of the fact that the women's movement has been on for the last 100 years. I think we need the same thing with colonialism. People said Britain is never going to lose its control over half the earth. It did. So that doesn't mean many other fundamental things changed, but some did. And so I think challenging what we mean by development and growth is not a futile task at all. It is the most important task in the world today, because there is absolutely no way we can control climate crisis and all the other stuff that, including sand mining, etc., that panelists have talked about, unless we do that. So then what's the alternative? And I should say here that I think we also need to, the COVID has made it so clear, climate and COVID have both made it so clear that we cannot afford to be nationalist in this.
Exactly.
Nation states do not make ecological sense. We say we will block the Ganga and not allow it to go into Bangladesh, or we'll block the Indus and not allow it to go into Pakistan. China says it will block Brahmaputra and not allow it to come into India. It makes no sense. It's a recipe for conflicts, right? So this hyper nationalism that we're all into, saying, you know, India ko bachana hai, vagera, vagera, is I think has to be very seriously challenged. So what alternatives do we have? I think, of course, the kind of stuff that Sumaira has talked about, you know, using recycling waste or other kinds of things. For instance, some groups like Hunar Shala and Kutch have shown how the malba that is created by knocking down buildings, which is just thrown, can actually be reused for construction. Many parts of the India, Hunar Shala, many others have shown how mud can be used. But essentially the idea that what local materials you have are what should be ideally used as far as possible. But also this, and energy, which I think Rajesh, you raised as an issue. All of them point to me to one thing: controlling demand. We cannot afford to have an economy which says demand to badhte rahe, and then we try and meet the supply somewhere desperately from somewhere. I'm not talking about the demand of the poor. I'm talking about the demand of the rich. And the global north in India, in the world today, which includes 50 million Indians or maybe 100 million Indians, are the ones that have to be shown that this is simply not the way to live. I think there was an interesting study that was released a couple of weeks back by Oxfam, if I'm not mistaken. The top 10 billionaires of the world are responsible for as much carbon emissions as 50% of the population of the world.
Wow.
It's those 10 guys who have to be tackled. And it can't just be by requesting, please, Adani ji, Tata ji, kuch kam kar lo. Ye nahi hoga. It has to be people's movements. We have to actually resist. We have to expose what's happening and resist it. Where they're willing to do something different, fine. But where they're not, it has to be resistance. This leads to two things. I'm sorry, I'm making this a bit longer than it should. One, yes, let's try and find all the sustainable alternatives that are possible. And there's a lot more that can be done. A lot is already being shown. And much more that can be done, including, for instance, if we have to drink coffee, and I love coffee, then the way that Arshia is doing it, or if we have to make buildings, then what Sumaira is talking about, etc. But the other is to also argue for degrowth. Where the world's population, Europe, United States, Korea, South Korea, Japan, Mumbai, Pune, Delhi, where people like us, like you and me who are on this call, have grown way too much, we have to be able to either be forced to or willingly degrow, which means as collectives actually scale down. In Europe, the degrowth movement is saying scale down by a factor of 10. 1/10 of the current energy and materials consumption is what might be sustainable. You simply cannot, you don't have the technological alternatives to do that. It has to be demand management, which is a cultural phenomenon. It's a political phenomenon. It's an economic phenomenon. It's not only a technological one. So we have to shift our goalposts. We have to move away from saying, वो क्या था वो Oneida television का एक ad है ना था what is it? Owner's pride, neighbor's envy. You got to reverse that. Okay, non-owner's pride and neighbor's envy. I don't have a fridge. I've lived without a fridge for the last 12 years, 13 years. My neighbor should be envious of me, saying, why are you to fridge ke bina reh raha hai? Why we should also be able to do it, instead of looking at me and saying, oh God, maybe he's too poor or he's too conjuice or whatever it is. No? So I think these are lots of cultural shifts also that need to happen. Quick points on cotton and on cotton especially. It's true that cotton sucks out a lot of water, but there's cotton and there's cotton. Kala cotton in the Kutch, for instance, which is the backbone of the revival of handlooms there, is completely rain-fed. And you know how much rain Kutch has. Those are the kinds of cotton varieties that we could, apart from, of course, hemp and jute and all is great alternatives. I totally go with that. But where cotton might still be necessary, we actually do have varieties that are very, very low water consumptive. Let's try those out. So I think looking also at our own diversity and our own traditions, we can find a lot of very, very interesting alternatives. On citizens' participation, maybe I'll come back in the next round. Thanks.
Perfect. So I think you have definitely put a googly over there, wherein you have actually changed the thought, wherein we have been trying to look at it from the angle that growth is anyhow going to happen. Find a sustainable way to do it. But it's over here, cut the fat, and the reality is you need to degrow yourself. So I think that's a good goalpost to look at. And if there's anyone else who would want to add on to this.
I could probably add an example of how we're trying to practice some elements of the degrowth that Ashish is referring to. So, you know, in the kind of social enterprise world, we're seen as a startup, and the goal of impact oriented startups these days is to achieve all of the sort of impact metrics you want, but you also need to generate a certain amount of revenue. And everyone evaluating you, whether it's for funding, whether it's for some sort of mentorship or whatever, you know, we're used to that sort of stuff. Everyone's looking very much also at that bottom line of how much money is really being generated by this organization as a proxy for how impactful they are. And I've been arguing for many, many years now with some of the, you know, mentors we've had, advisors we've had, saying that the amount of money we make actually has very little to do with how much impact we have on the ground. And it certainly has very little to do with how much ecological impact we have. So if our goal is to protect bees and pollinators, it has no connection with how much money we're making. The scale of our business is really very different from the scale of our social and ecological impact. And it's particularly important because as a coffee business, if you wanted to increase the scale of your business, your goal would be really simple: to sell more coffee. And to sell more coffee, you would work with more producers. And to work with more producers, maybe if they followed very sustainable farming practices, they wouldn't produce the kind of volume you need as a business to meet your business targets. Does that make sense? It's very, very kind of clear cut that if we put pressure on our producers right now to meet our business targets, we would end up over extracting from the soil, adding in some kind of fertilizer or the other, and certainly deforesting some regions where coffee is grown, which is completely the opposite of why we wanted to start out in the first place. So for us, there are certain non-negotiables that really, in some sense, limit the scale of our business. And so we have to tell people who want to invest in us, who want to fund, saying, hey, we may not be profitable in the way you want. That's not the purpose. And it's, in some sense, it's been interesting to kind of be a part of this social impact entrepreneurship space, because I feel that while some of the challenges and problems we're seeing, whether it's social exploitation or the scale of environmental degradation we're seeing because of capitalist production and economic systems, in some ways we're also looking back at that to provide solutions for these, right? So I'm not sure that we can really look at business as usual market approaches to solve problems that were created by those business as usual market approaches. If we have to use market approaches, they have to be completely different and totally based on certain non-negotiable values. And for us, our non-negotiable values are certainly, for example, the kind of livelihood expectations that our producers need. They set them. Our metrics are set by producers themselves. We are not saying, okay, this is our impact and, our goal is to increase your income by 1% or 5% or whatever. Producers are telling us that, and it's a conversation to see how we can do the best we can. But there are certain non-negotiables that are just non-negotiable. And in some sense, in saying that really clearly, we're really unpopular and unattractive to anybody who wants to invest in us. But that's not the purpose anyway. And I think it's been a very important and difficult realization to very openly say that when we don't want to use conventional market-based approaches to solve problems that were created by conventional market-based approaches.
Perfect. I think, Harsha, I think there are two takeaways that I got from what you just said. One, something that I always assumed, that going into the sustainable, direction, when you go for a product, the supply, the demand is lesser than the supply. I always thought that, but that's a myth that you just broke for me, where you said that based on your values, you'll have tried to ensure that, even if the demand is higher, that you're still going to keep it the way it is, and that's how it's going to be. I think that's one ray of hope. Let's put it that way, that there is a market that's being created that appreciates, clean products. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from the conversation from what you just put out right now. Is there anyone else who wants to, add in on this?
Yeah, some points I like to share. Last
Yes.
1 year, I got the privilege to work with Ministry of Jal Shakti, understood how Niti Aayog works, and there had been a lot of mind-blowing experience that I had, and understood how this country is, how huge this country is, how diverse we are, and somewhere the demands of good things, the basic things are so huge that we still do not have the basics in the country. So somewhere, even if as a policy maker, it can be a governor, it can be a chief minister or the prime minister, they have a lot of limitations which they are not able to implement. And looking at a lot of research papers that I have got from United Nations, a lot of WHO had been suggesting a lot of things to the country, and that there are many theorems to what is the challenge and what is the solution to it. Everything boils down to definitely bringing down the demand, as we had been talking about. Thanks to Ashish ji for taking this up. Somewhere demands are still so huge, and the projections in next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, we do not have the time to even think. The situation is such that somewhere everything is blamed down to the population. That even if there is 10% of the population right now in India who are really smart, who are working towards the right direction, but the balance 50% is a very big challenge, because for them survival is the situation where they don't care about other aspects. So that is one of the concerns where we need solutions for them. Somewhere we can target them, stabilize them, and bigger challenge is where they do not know what is the life after 5 years. So this insecurity, uncertainty has made people really unrest, and people have really lost the focus towards sustainability.
Thank you, sir. Sumera ma'am, you were going to say a few words.
Yeah. I was going to say that I completely agree with Ashish, and I would rather look at the benefits of having a huge population. And that is that, and also the benefits of living in this time when we have the advantages of looking to the kind of mess, you would say, that the West has made in their model of development. So I think we can sit down and analyze that why we don't want to be like the West. We don't want to be another Shanghai or another Chicago. If you go to America, you'll see the people on the ground fighting to reverse many of those things. As somebody said just now, in England, there's a huge movement to reduce your needs. And we have a population, which is a huge population, which is used to living with very, very minimal needs to start with. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I think what Ashish has been working towards is really important. How to make them live with the minimum needs that they have and still be happy and still be productive and still contribute. And they are all contributing. So I think we're in a wonderful situation. At the UN presentation on sand mining, in which I gave the keynote address in 2018, they agreed with us that India has the capability to lead the world in such technologies, because we have the problem in the form of a huge garbage heap, so much garbage everywhere, but that also gives us the ability to find the solutions and to teach the world how to do it. And that 10% of population we're talking about is the youth, who are so brilliant, and they are the ones who are going to find those solutions and make sure that we lead the world and not let us go on in the same old way following the West. So that's what I would like to say.
Ma'am, I like to share a good news with you, especially, and all of you, that new sand management and construction policy is already there in place, which will come to existence soon. So all the builders and the redevelopment projects, it is going to be compulsory for them to reuse 60% of the current building material which they get. That will transform a lot of things. And coming to sand mining, there was a major, lot of fight that keeps happening, because in the higher authority, I don't see them talking. They always fight with each other. So what I learned is sand mining is equally important, because otherwise the river system will collapse. It will not have enough water to accommodate enough water. So they are coming up with a policy where certain size of the builders will be allowed to hand mine the sands, not machine mined. So that will bring down the scale of mining that they had been doing, and that will meet only the requirement that is needed for the rivers to survive. On the other hand, definitely the bigger construction giants, they will have to rework and reuse their material for sand. So I think there's the more detailings. I'm not the right person because I'm just a water guy, but this is what had been told to me, and this is yet to be implemented, because we are getting a lot of restrictions from local governments across the nation, because we are waiting for them. But yes, I'm sure that if this policy is in place, things will be much better. It will move towards a good positive direction.
Subhajit, just to get an idea, what you're saying is, if this policy comes into place, would it be part of the RERA compliance?
RERA is a state government organization governed by their own thought process and their own rules and regulation. That does not mean that I'm against Gautam Chatterjee, sir, but that has nothing to do with the central government or national level policies. But definitely RERA is to protect.
What's the system that is going to monitor the...
that is environment board is there. It directly comes under central government. Ministry of Environment will take care of it. Because even the rivers, somewhere, water is a state issue, but rivers is a central government property. So somewhere policy making will make things better. Because a lot of places we have seen for all the policies across different verticals, they have been so localized that people make their own rules as per their convenience. So central policies are missing. If the policies are right, things will be better. Like coming to cotton, government is buying cotton. Why? Government should ban farming of cotton at areas where it is already drought prone. So there are situations, there are a lot of challenges. I don't want to get into that right now because that is not going to help us. But yes, policies needs to be implemented. Right kind of policy making should be there. And that's where we need all of your help to really, somewhere I would also request all of you to connect with Niti Aayog and give your inputs, because that will make things much faster.
Talking about Niti Aayog, Niti Aayog is the one that released the statement that we are at 68. I think our point 58 in SDG and in 2019 and okay. So now just talking about Niti Aayog, something about that paper that they released in 2019, that presentation that they gave, which is a bit alarming, is one of the most the worst performing states in that entire survey was Uttar Pradesh. And as of now, Uttar Pradesh is standing with open arms as a state, waiting for more industrialization, creating a segment wholly solely that is going to cater to a manufacturing industry. Is that an alarming step towards?
I cannot comment on that.
It's open. It's open for.
No. What governments are doing, I cannot comment. But it is easy to talk. I can also talk a lot of big things. But convenience, sustainability, and consistency is important, no matter which state it is. And definitely everyone is trying their own ways with their challenges that they have. And I wish all the states all the best.
Thank you, sir. Avnish, you were going to, yeah.
No, I think he summed it up well. Basically, see, it's like we have this conundrum, right? We want a metro in Bombay, but we don't want RA trees to go away. And we want to make sure that it's not inconvenient for everybody else. So we can either have the metro or we can have RA. We're not going to have both. So that's, I think the panel has kind of summarized it, you know. It's better if we don't think about the metro if we want to save the RA. So I see that conundrum up and coming in lots of issues. We have the same armchair critiques sitting and talking about how we can do well for the environment, but cannot sit in their cars without the AC. First of all, they cannot travel without their cars. So the populace that's actually talking about sustainability is the one that's creating the issue in that case, which, as somebody has mentioned, right, the top 50 million Indians who would be the 1% of the country kind of making that kind of money and contributing to that issue. So minimalism, less consumerism is eventually the answer. But I think it's going to be a very, very tough sell in India because the Indian young populace is just about accepting consumerism. We're just getting into the Western mindset of e-shopping and buying stuff online and going into a store and picking up things. So it's a really tumultuous time for India. But definitely there are kind and good-hearted people who have the right intention and are going to drive this conversation further. But putting a stop on consumerism, I believe, is going to be extremely difficult, considering majority of our population is young and majority of our influence is anyways Western. From that perspective.
Can I add something here?
Yes, please.
So two things. One is, I absolutely agree that tackling consumerism is very difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. And I don't think we've ever shied away from doing things that are very difficult. Like I mentioned, whether defeating colonialism or fighting for women's rights or whatever else we have been fighting for, right? So I think we should not give up before even trying. Now, if one is to follow, if the young people today have to follow, and I don't see any youth in the panel except maybe Arshia. I don't know, Arshia, whether you still think of yourself as youth. But if the youth today have to follow some aspects of the West, there's no reason they can't follow what Sumaira was talking about, where in the West, young people are actually moving away from that kind, many young people are moving away from that kind of insane consumerism. I mean, if you go to so many cities in Europe, businessmen in three-piece suits are riding cycles. They're cycling to work. So you want to copy something, then let's copy at least some of the good stuff that's now emerging, because people are now increasingly sick and tired of the kind of what the West, the Western way of life, right? In the West itself, which is why degrowth is becoming such a popular movement. So I think that's one very important thing. The second is, and so to do that, I think we also need the cultural icons. And I don't necessarily mean famous film stars and whatever. It could be, 10 young people in the country who say, look, we are living this, we are leaving this kind of consumerism, and we want deliberately to live this kind of a simpler lifestyle. Today on so-called social media, there are so many completely unknown people who are so popular in so many ways. So I think we need those kind of, what do they call, amplifiers or influencers or whatever. So much terminology that you guys will probably know better. But the second important thing here is going back to the issue of people's participation and also linking to the issue of policy, which Subhajit mentioned. I'm happy to hear about the new policies that are coming. But, Subhajit, with all due respect, we've seen a Ministry of Environment with some of the strongest laws in the country and the strongest policies in the country completely capitulating in the last couple of decades, and especially the last 5-6 years, but I would say even before that. Not a single one of the environmental laws and policies are being implemented by the same ministry, including central laws. I'm not even talking about stuff that's in the state domains. So I have worked for many, many years on policies, and I coordinated the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, all thrown into the dustbin when it comes to saying we need development and we need growth. And when it comes to money, yes, you're absolutely right. And this is where I think what's really, really important is for us to support people's movements on the ground, movements of resistance, who are the ones who are in the front line and facing the flag, including people like Sumaira, whose life has been threatened, but also, local villagers all over who are protesting mining or protesting big dams or whatever it is. And the movements that are showing that there are alternatives, which are very much possible without that kind of thing, which means that we need to fight for much greater empowerment of communities. We have the 73rd and 74th Amendment, very good constitutional amendments. But we need to take that much further, not just in terms of law and policy, but actually creating that kind of power on the ground. And that's what, since we're in the month of Gandhiji's birthday, he spoke about Swaraj. That's what he meant. Swaraj was not about India's independence from the British. Of course, it was that, but it was much more than that. It was about each one of us, and each one of us in our communities also having autonomy. But, and this is where the earlier points also come in, our autonomy and our freedom to do what we want, but in responsibility to your autonomy and your freedom to do what we want. So our autonomy can't mean we do coal mining in Australia on indigenous territories. Because our Swaraj, that's not Swaraj at all. So I think we have to do that. And one last point, and of course, all of these are difficult, but we have so many examples around the world where these things have happened. We can learn from them, extend them, give them our support. And for heaven's sake, let's not be diplomatic anymore. Where we find policies are not being implemented, call a spade a spade. Join the movements who are calling out and saying this is completely wrong. The EIA notification 2020, the most horrendous notification ever come from a government on environmental issues. And it's fantastic that 2 lakh young people spoke out against it. These are young people who can be spoken to. I've already been spoken to 1,000 of them in the last month or so, about how we also need not just to protest against what the government might be doing, but our own consumption patterns, our own lifestyles, the way we do things, etc. So I think there's a lot on that we can do. And finally, tackling inequality. We have to combine. This is why I've been saying we don't need a Green New Deal, we need a Rainbow New Deal. A new revolution of multiple hues. The green and the blue is the environment, the red, I don't know, you may or may not be Marxist, but let's say social revolution or social justice issues, and multiple hues, and rainbow, LGBTQ, all of that put together, which also then includes tackling inequality. India, if 5% of the population own 95% of its wealth, it is just completely unacceptable. There is no way that anybody can justify that at any level. And why cannot the government impose a 2% tax on the richest 1% of the country, which will generate enough money for universal food security, health security, employment guarantee, education, and all other basic needs? Just 2% tax on the richest 1%. But no, this government doesn't want to do it because it doesn't want to upset the apple cart. So we have to ask for it. We have to demand it. We have to fight for it. Upper salary limits. Do we do that in our organizations? In our businesses, wherever we are? Do we say, okay, we will not take more than, I don't know, whatever, 40,000 a month or 60,000 a month or whatever? No, we want 2 lakhs, we want 5 lakhs, we want we look at all the corporates and say, oh my God, they're getting 1 crore a month. I should also be getting that. So fighting for Switzerland, I think, is the only country which tried to bring in an upper salary limit. It was defeated by a narrow margin of 51, 52%, 48%, something like that. They're going to try and do it again. We should argue for that in India also. Is there any reason why people should be earning the kind of things that they're earning? Absolutely no reason whatsoever. Is there any reason why a 5-member family should have a 27-story building, house? You all know who I'm talking about. Call a spade a spade. Tell him this is unacceptable. You live a normal house. How much sand would have gone into that Sumera, that one pretty horrible looking building? So I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not one for diplomacy. I think these things have to be called out. And even as we go do constructive work, everything that you people have been talking about, fantastic. We also have to be resisting and protesting and doing what Gandhi said, Satyagraha. Swaraj and Satyagraha, dono ki zarurat hai, mujhe lagta hai.
Thank you so much, Ashish ji. I think that's a brilliant note, to conclude this narrative, because I think time is also pressing. We are done with an hour, and I swear an hour just went like a wink of an eye. I was so hooked and engaged that some point of time I got a reminder over there that you've gone way too far. So let me just try paraphrasing this and summarize this in the best that I can do in my capacity. I say that we are in this together to not just change. Can we have the host? Can we mute? Yep. We are in this together, not just to change the world around us, but to change ourselves, change our perspectives, change what we call demand, change what we call our need as consumers. And I think it's a good start to a thought process, at least, some food for thought for all those who are listening, all those who will listen to this. That together, I think there is a ray of hope. Like Ashish ji said, there is a ray of hope that yeah, we can't lose hope before not even trying it, right? So give it a shot, come together as the youth, and let's work for a better tomorrow. I would like to thank all of y'all for your precious time. Uh, I'll first start off with Dr. Arshia and Avnish. I am a user of both your products. I buy from Boheco as well as from Black Bazaar. And as the DRR for next year on this platform, I openly want to say that Rotaract District 3142 will be promoting both your brands just because for the values that you all stand for. We will be promoting both your brands throughout the year till 2022. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's the least we can do. When it comes to the rest of the panel, Sumaira ma'am, Ashish ji, and Subhajit ji, again truly humbled for the work that you all have done, that you all could spare time and share your thoughts over here. Truly, it's a fan movement. There's this goosebump still here, and I really like this conversation. But since time is pressing, I would really like, and if you all are okay with it, sooner or later we try to do some kind of engagement conversations through our social media platforms, because I really think we have barely touched the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more to be uncovered, and there is so much more to be learned. But saying this, I would thank you so much for your time, and please stay on the line. I'll hand it over to the MOCs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, such an insightful conversation. I genuinely feel like today I walk out having learned something new.
I told you. Every time I walk back here, I realize I've learned something new.
See what's next? I'd like to call upon Rotarian Sandhya Ma'am, past President and Youth Service Director of Rotary Club of Hiranandani Estate, to give away the token of appreciation to our ever wonderful speakers. Ma'am, from our end, to appreciate your contribution, we have something for you as well.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah. So good evening. I think this topic could go on and on. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. As DRRE said, this topic can just go on, and very interesting topic. So it's an honor to have all these panelists today, exceptionally in speakers indeed. Lot of insights, views to the topic, sustainable future, dream or reality. Very informative sessions, lot of solutions, and I suppose each one of them, great contribution by each one of you, in spite of all the challenges. My best wishes to all of you. And so I think, can we make our India self-sufficient? Sone ki chidiya, jo Hindustan. So let's all strive for it. And the moderator, very well moderated. And thank you so much, all of you, for your valuable time and inputs. Dr. Arshia Bose, Mr. Suhajit Mukherjee, Mr. Avnish Pandya, Ms. Sumaira Abdullah, Mr. Ashish Kothari. Appreciate, gratitude. Thank you so much for coming here and honoring us. Anything Rotary can do, we are there with you. Thank you so much once again.
If I may add to that, we thank you heartily for joining us and making this event special. As we know, funds generated from this event are being donated to ACT REC, Rotaract, Mumbai. That's a cancer patients hospital, and they provide for underprivileged kids. So this is, we will donate an amount to the same in the name of y'all, the speakers for this event. We hope that you accept this token of appreciation, and we thank you again for giving us the opportunity to have you on board. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank the Rotary Club of Randani Estate, who've been with us throughout this event and have partnered with us as main host for this event next 2020. A small token of appreciation from our end for y'all, brought to you by Trillium Team Hub. It's a small giveaway from our end, and we hope that you accept it. Thank you. Moving on, I'd also like to thank two people because of whom we were able to make this event happen. The Platinum Host Rotary, the Rotary Club of Randani Estate, the co-hosts for our event, Rotary Club of Thane Midtown and Rotary Club of Thane East, and Support Rotary, Rotary Club of Dombivli Midtown. Also, next the conclave this year is powered by Trillium Team Hub in association with Aeropixel India, lifestyle partner Cinematic Industries, strategic partner logistics partner Markites, refreshment partners Creative Enterprises, support event partner Sevenscape. We would also like to thank Rotaract Rishikesh Tiwari from Rotaract Club of Dombivli Sun City, CEO of Canris Infotech, our technology partner, to help us digitalize this event and help us reach a lot of people today. But I would also like to thank the Platinum Rotaract clubs who've been with us throughout the year. The Rotaract Club of New Bombay Seaside, Rotaract Club of SIS College Nerul, Rotaract Club of Navi Mumbai Smart City, Rotaract Club of Navi Mumbai Industrial Area, Rotaract Club of Thane Downtown, Rotaract Club of Thane Suburban, Rotaract Club of Thane North End, Rotaract Club of Dombivli, Rotaract Club of Dombivli Sun City, Rotaract Club of Kalyan Riverside, and Rotaract Club of Kalyan West, and Rotaract Club of Ulhasnagar Sapna Garden.